The only way to get good at anything is muscle memory. And the only way to get muscle memory is to train your big dumb muscles. And I was just like, that's really smart.
Thanks, Rodney. I do have big
train your big dumb muscles, Sam. Exactly.
Big muscles is all I keep hearing you say.
And it's definitely the point of this podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Rodney Evans, and that guy is Sam Spurlin.
Hello, Rodney Evans. I am Sam Spurlin, and I'm here to talk to you about work stuff.
Oh, good. Okay. That's great, because this is At Work with the Ready. It's a podcast about work, and specifically about modernizing organizations as the future of work meets the present moment.
And as you know, each episode, we turn our attention to one common organizational pattern that we think is worth digging into. We pull it apart like a couple of mechanics working on an old car. Grease on our shirts, wiping off our hands, and we propose solutions for what to do instead.
I feel like we talk about clothes more on this podcast than one would expect. There's a lot of costume changes. Have you noticed that?
I have not noticed that, but now
I'm not mad at
hyper aware of it.
Yeah, it's just a thing. That
Although
I
do think about my shirt a lot because you one time called my favorite shirt my podcast blouse, and now I feel like I can never wear it again.
Or you could wear it all the time, anytime.
Yeah.
That would be fun too.
Yeah.
We're not talking about Sam's favorite blouse today. What we are talking about is actually not really an organizational pattern. I guess it is an organizational pattern, but this is going to be a slightly different flavor of our typical episode, which I'm very excited about. And I know Sam is particularly excited because I feel like in the pantheon of Sam's favorite things to talk about, this topic has got to be top 5, right?
Probably. It's definitely up there. Hot dogs, hockey, the mundane, and then probably 2 other things.
Exactly.
I don't know.
So we're going to talk about the mundane, and yet it's going to be exciting and enlivening, as the mundane often is when approached a certain kind of way. But before we do, let's check in.
All right. We're going to go with a topical check-in today. What is something mundane that you think you probably think about more than the average person?
Can you go first? Are you ready?
I absolutely can go first.
Hit it.
For me, it is probably the software that I use when I have choices, when I'm not mandated to use something. And then whether I'm mandated to use it or I'm choosing to use something, like really learning how to use it very well, which is something that we'll probably talk more about when we get into the meat of the episode. But I feel like it is very mundane to talk about the tools that you use, but I think there's a lot of depth in really being thoughtful about knowing your tools.
Nice. The first thing that came to mind for me was travel. I think that because I do travel a lot for work and also just for life, we're very fortunate that we do get to go to a lot of cool places. I think a lot about packing and what I need and what I'm going to check or carry on, and how I'm going to get to airports, and what time of day I want to fly, and the cost benefit of an extra night versus a more expensive plane ticket. And I feel like I put a lot of attention into travel planning and execution that is probably more than a typical person would.
Yeah. I feel like we could do an entire episode just on that. And I know we don't normally do follow-up questions and check-ins, but I can't help it. Because I don't know that I've really actually traveled with you very much.
I don't think we have.
If at all.
Yeah.
Ever. So are you a get to the airport as early as possible person, or are you like, I'm going to try to not stop moving between like getting to the airport and getting on the plane, or probably somewhere more sane in between those two?
In between. I used to be no stops, walk from the Uber onto my plane when I travel like every week.
School of traveling.
Totally. Like no downtime. Now, because I travel a little bit less and I feel like my time at home feels less precious and I feel less compelled to like compress my travel in the same way, I'm more likely to leave myself, I like to I like to be through security 20 minutes before I'm going to board so that I can like get a coffee, get a water. I don't like using bathrooms on planes. I'd prefer to do that in the airport, etc.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to like hustle. So, yeah, I'm kind of an in-betweener, but I used to be just like straight through, no stops. And my husband is like, let's get there and have like a full meal and read a book and fully. And so every time we travel, we start negotiating like 3 days before over how early we're going to get to the airport.
Yeah. Cool. I'm more like your husband. I travel like I'm a dad of 4 and like, we're like going to Disneyland. I don't like to be stressed.
Don't want to be stressed. No, he's like, as always, like, let's leave plenty of time. Let's leave plenty of time. Speaking of dads of 4, that has nothing to do with leaving a review, but leave us one anyway. Whether you're a dad of 4 or a mom of none or a cat lady, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'd appreciate it. And follow us on, I'm going to say on Instagram. I know we're prioritizing LinkedIn and YouTube, but follow us on Instagram. It's fun. Jack posts funny memes. And also, if you check us out on YouTube this week, you will see me at my lake house where it's very warm in our crow's nest, where it's too loud to run the air conditioning. And so I will be very glowy by the end of this.
So the natural limit on this episode is going to be your consciousness.
Yeah, when I pass out from heat exhaustion.
That's how we know we're done.
Yeah, that's when I'm no longer in the frame of the camera because I'm on the floor. That's podcast is you can do the closing round alone. Okay. Make sure to thank Taylor and Jack while I
I'll do all the things. I'll ask you what you learned. Probably something about the importance of hydration.
While I fight for consciousness.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Great. Well, we have this little slot here for topic intro where nothing is written. And it's just we're talking about mundane stuff and how the mundane in organizations can be really important. And caring about the mundane, I think, can be a really valuable, good use of your time. But there is a pattern here that I think we have sussed out. So what do you think that pattern is?
I think that the pattern in most organizations is a pendulum swaying between dysfunctional routines, like made up work around the work, and emerging crises that are actually or feel urgent in the moment. And that most people working in organizations are not nudged. The systems are not designed to point our attention to the mundane moves that would actually get us off of that pendulum. So that cycle and that swing between not real work and real work that requires urgent attention continues.
I think that is right. I was struggling because I was trying to perceptful. That's not the word that I'm. That's
Perceptive?
not a word. Perceptive. There it is.
Mm-hmm,
I'm sitting here in air conditioning. I have no excuses.
I know.
It's a perceptive, I think, look at what's going on there. And you mentioned at the top that this is going to feel like a little bit of a different episode because basically we both made a list of mundane stuff that we think would be like fun to just go back and forth and talk about. So we're going to do that. But why don't we just spend just a couple of minutes on some of the reasons why the mundane doesn't really rise to the level of active conversation in most organizations. Why do you think that is?
I don't really know. Because to me, this is like so often is the most important stuff. Part of me always just says habit and tradition is just the way. But like also we know, if you look at high performing Navy SEAL teams, athletic teams, any team pays very close attention to its routines. And having worked with a lot of Navy SEALs in my career, they talk a lot about discipline. And what they don't actually mean by discipline is muscling through. What they mean by discipline is such rote and habituated routines that they leave more cognitive bandwidth for responding. And that all of this dumb shit, like checking your weapons and cleaning your gear and loading your pack and doing PT so that you can run when you need to. Like all of these habits are just meant to lower the cognitive load so you have room for the important shit. And I'm like, why don't we do that everywhere? Like that makes a ton of sense. But like we don't. And so I don't totally know why, because I think if you study any high performance team, they absolutely sweat the mundane.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And I think something that I feel a lot in organizations that we've worked with is that changing an organization, which is ostensibly what we are generally there to do in most cases, and that looks like lots of different things, might be big change, might be small change. Generally, though, working in a very large organization and trying to change how it does things feels like very big work, because it does. Like it is very big in the sense of like the outcomes, the impact that we are trying to create.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we shortcut our thinking to believe that in order to have big outcomes, big impact, we must do big things that
Big
really
moves.
matter. We have to do the reorg because, of course, the only way we could change this 10,000 person organization is to change how the teams are structured. And talking about how we actually show up to meetings or the expectations around following up on things feels like you're talking about something so small and we're trying to do this huge thing. So I think it's very easy to kind of paper over the mundane as not important. And like, why are you even talking about this small stuff when we're here to do like the big things?
Yeah. And I was thinking about this episode over the weekend, and I was reminded of actually when I still worked at McChrystal Group, I had a networking sort of biz devy meeting with a CHRO in actually like local to me. And she was like, I'm really bought into like everything you all put into the world and what you say, but like I don't totally understand what you actually do. And so I was explaining it to her, and I really started with op rhythm because we've talked a million times on this show about why op rhythms are important, and particularly for this company and some things they were going through, why not having an all company op rhythm might be, important to look at, et cetera. And I remember her saying, like, I sort of got through this 30-second spiel, and she was like, so it's just meetings? You just do meetings? Like that's the magic? And so like that experience obviously like landed and traumatized me. And then I just saw an article posted somewhere, maybe Jack sent it to me on Instagram, I can't remember, where someone is basically positing that like all work is now is meetings. And I'm like, see, that's why. Like that's why we gave a shit even back then, and why we still give a shit. Cause like, yes, meetings are mundane. They're also like incredibly prolific, a huge time and money suck. And so it's like, why not meetings? Why not cleaning your gear? Why not sorting your meetings? Why not, you and I both like the Madden. Is it John Madden? No. Who's that coach who makes you tie your shoes?
Oh, John Wooden.
John Wooden. John Madden played hockey.
Oh boy. Football.
Nope. Football. Okay.
Well, okay. Actually, you inadvertently actually said something correct. There was a professional hockey player named John Madden who played for the New Jersey Devils
That's
for a
who
long
I'm
time.
talking
But
about.
that's not what you were. That is not
That's
what you thought you were saying.
My knowledge of hockey is so deep and profound that I know about John Madden from New Jersey. No, I meant John Wooden. Who was his team?
Yeah. You believe UCLA.
UCLA basketball. Anyway,
I hope that's right. If not, then we get to get Jack coming in here again as another Voice of God edit. I'm not a basketball guy, but I have read some of John Wooden's work and followed.
Well, I think John Madden was a great basketball player. What do you think of football? I can't keep them in my head. They're all the same.
And then announcer.
They're all the
same. You're doing a great job, though.
Okay,
I
thanks.
really appreciate you really just leaning into this sports
I'm just like,
persona.
I don't care. I don't know. Anyway, small habits, big changes. Isn't that what Atomic Habits is about? Which I like skimmed a really long time ago and seemed good, but then I lost the plot.
I mean, Atomic Habits has been popular for a long time, and I don't know it well enough to like do it justice here. But from the title alone, a small atomic habits that can be built on top of each other create the sort of change that that I think we're often looking for. And just to maybe close the loop on the John Wooden example,
His
the
name's John Madden, Sam.
I think we
Be
may have
respectful.
distracted ourselves from the actual example there. But
I
he
know what you're
tells
talking
this
about.
famous, and I'm pretty sure this is not apocryphal because I have seen him write about it itself. But basically, on the first day of practice at the beginning of the year, and this is not just some average sort of like, this is the best college basketball team in the year, won many national championships. First practice of the year, he teaches his team how to properly put on their socks and tie their shoes. Because, and everybody, kind of rolls their eyes at that, because why? Like, we are, 19-year-old guys who've been playing basketball our entire lives.
Sure.
Why are you doing this? And his whole point is that if you basically, you run the risk of getting blisters and not being able to play if you don't do this correctly. So we're just going to take care of it at the very front end of us starting to work together. We're going to do this thing, and we're going to guarantee that nobody is ever going to miss a practice or miss a game because they got blisters on their feet from putting on their socks wrong. And yeah, it's kind of a funny example, but I think it is something that can be applied far beyond just college basketball teams.
Totally. Or professional football teams. That reminds me of, I think I talked on this podcast about going to string camp, but if I didn't, I went to string camp. And I was in a master class with a very, very famous cellist. And this dude is like, just so expert in his field. And he starts every practice by playing open strings, not even scales, open strings. And that blew my mind, because obviously every teacher I've ever had is like, start with scales. But the fact that he's just like, the thing that he said that I loved so much in that class was that he did this thing where he'd be like, repeat after me. Your body is a stupid dog, and you have to train it
That sounds
like a
something you'd say
stupid
to
dog.
me.
I know, right? And those weren't his exact words, but the stupid dog thing was in there. And basically, he was just like, you play open strings to train your big dumb muscles to have correct bow speed and position. And he's basically like, don't do anything harder until you have muscle memory. The only way to get good at anything is muscle memory. And the only way to get muscle memory is to train your big dumb muscles. And I was just like, that's really smart.
Thanch, Rodney. I do
Yeah.
have big
Train your big dumb muscles, Sam. Exactly.
Big muscles is all I keep hearing you say.
And it's definitely
One
the
last
point
thought.
of this podcast is how fucking
last
yoked
thought
Sam is.
in the same direction that you're going here. And I don't even know if this will come up again or if I can even articulate it. But there is something, and I'm going to use a word that probably have
Isn't a real
never
word?
actually heard come out of my mouth, which is spiritual. There's something about being the type of person who cares about the mundane, even notices the mundane as a starting point, and then thinks about how to do those things better, how they even should, what they could do differently with the mundane. There is something about just being that type of person that is very attractive to me personally. And I try to do that in my life and in my relationships. And I think bringing it into work as well is sometimes a very centering sort of exercise when it is very easy to kind of lose yourself in these huge, often quite faceless, massive organizations that at the end of the day, in most cases, don't really care about you. And
For sure.
how do you ground yourself as a human being in that sort of system? I think noticing and caring about the mundane can be a really powerful way of kind of centering you in a very decentering experience.
I love that. Also, I feel like Jason Fox rubbed off on you. Also, I remain so jealous that I wasn't there for that conversation. It was so good. Also, one last aside, because you just made me think of something. So I'm living at our lake house right now because I didn't get to spend almost any time here this summer. And my old dog likes to go swimming, and it's good for his joints. And so I get up early in the morning before it gets hot, and I take him on a boat and we go to a sandy beach where he can easily wade in and he doesn't have to jump. And then we go swimming. And it's very sweet. That's a real highlight of my day. And this morning, I was coming back and I was thinking about how, without anyone ever telling me or without reading anything, how I've really learned to like read the water in our lake and to start to understand, because there's a lot of debris in our lake, like trees and stuff, because it's very, very rural and giant trees fall down and float through it. And you often can't see them. Like they often don't stick out above the water. And we have a kind of boat where like I could absolutely rip the prop off if I just like plow over one of these things. And over time and just paying really close attention for dozens or hundreds of hours on this boat, I've really started to like understand a landscape that changes literally daily. And I was thinking about, it's so funny that we're doing this because I was thinking today about how that kind of ability to sense and respond only happens when you pay really close attention to super boring shit over a long period of time.
Totally, totally. And I would imagine, I think I can hear it in your voice, like you're proud of that, like
Yes,
rightfully so. Like you have
totally.
developed a skill that you didn't even know was a skill probably to be developed until
Totally.
you started doing it. And now you're good at it.
Yeah. I mean, I rarely crash our boat, which is sick. I am proud of it because I'm like, oh, I like understand this giant complex system enough, just enough
Yep.
to stay safe.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's cool.
I love it.
That's real cool.
Okay, let's
All
talk
right.
about mundane things besides driving boats and tying shoes.
I mean, those might come up again, but why don't you kick us off? We have this list here. We'll kind of just go back and forth. And
Yeah.
I think we should both feel free to like jump in on the other person's topic because you definitely have some things in here where I would love to share some additional thoughts. So where do you want to begin?
I mean, the first sort of mundane topic I think to look at is the humble to-do list.
Yeah.
You know, this is a place where I see people talk about more calories spent on something than is needed. Where I'm just like, my dude, make yourself a damn system for this. So, like, get out of your notebook. I know you love your notebook. Get out of your notebook. Anytime I see someone writing down their to-dos in a notebook, I'm like, where is that going? When are you looking at that again? Are you going to rewrite that into a digital tool? Let's not do that. I love notebooks also, don't get me wrong, but I think you have to have if you don't have a task management system that is like multi-device, I think you're in trouble because you're not always going to be sitting at your desk. You're not always going to have your notebook with you. And so I think you have to have something that you can add to on your phone, on the go, et cetera, that is accessible everywhere. And I personally use Sunsama. I like Sunsama. I'm going to talk later about why that, but I used to use Trello for a period of time. I used Notion. I used Wunderlist. I used Notes. I used Evernote. I've used all kinds of different tools and systems. I don't have a particularly strong view on that, but I think if you don't have a way that you're capturing to-dos and a way that you can categorize them by like work stuff, maybe with subcategories for different teams or different projects, life stuff, maybe with subcategories for things that are shared with your family or not. Like I have a place where I put like books people recommend to me. Like, I just think you need a place for all of your to-do stuff that makes it feel as easeful as possible. And so that for me, mostly it's just so I don't have to remember things. Like, I just don't want to remember when Ed says, can you bring that back from the lake? It just goes into a list. I don't want to have to remember that for later. So that's my first one. Everybody can control how they capture their to-dos. I think a lot of people don't put a lot of thought into it. And I think it could be one of the most freeing personal workflow habits that you could attend to.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think there are probably infinite number of systems and flavors of what you end up doing there. I would even be, I'm if you're writing in your notebook and that works for you, Sam says it's okay. Rodney hates you, but I think you're doing great. The important thing I think is that you have really thought about the type
Mm.
of person you are and the types of tools you like to use and the type of work that you are doing. And you
Mhm.
have created something that ultimately, at the end of the day, you trust. If
Yes.
it's when trust breaks down in your system that it starts to get leaky and spiral out of control, and basically you no longer have a thing that you can actively use. So whatever tool it is, whatever sort of methodology you follow, I think there's a lot of flexibility there. I think the maybe a common pattern across all of them, whether you're writing in a notebook or using Sunsama, a good starting point would be to develop the muscle to always be putting thoughts into one place. So like
Mm.
basically having one or as few inboxes as possible. And anytime you have a thought about a thing that you should do or something that would inform one of the projects that you're working on, you have a very easy and quick way just to get that into a place. And then having a daily or every other day rhythm of going into that place and deciding what to do with the things that are in there. Like, oh, this is a to-do item, I'm going to put it on the right list. This is an idea about a project, I'm going to throw it into a note for that project. This is a thing that doesn't actually matter anymore, I'm going to delete it. I think you can go a long way with kind of those two habits.
Love that. Awesome. All right, let's do one
All
of
right.
yours.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Let's. I'm going to go to my tools one, which is kind of a it's a continuation of my check-in round. It maybe also kind of shades into what we were just talking about a little bit. But the way I would talk, or the way I think about this one, is that I actually take a lot of inspiration from folks who work with their hands for a living
Mm.
on this one.
Mhm.
Folks who really need to rely on actual physical tools to get their work done often have intense preferences about those tools, and they can
Mhm.
tell you very subtle things about like, oh, this brand of hammer, it looks cool, but actually it's garbage, and I've been
Mhm.
using this one for 30 years because of X, Y, and Z. And they have such a intimate connection to their tools just out of necessity. And then I look at knowledge workers, some knowledge workers, and I ask myself, like, why don't most of us have that same connection to the tools that we use every day?
Yeah.
So why do you not know any keyboard shortcuts for your email program? Like, why are you
Yeah.
pointing and clicking to all of these things? And you spend 7 hours a day responding to emails, and every single time you have to put your hand on the mouse and click around when there are a handful of keyboard shortcuts that would make you so much faster and more efficient at what you are doing. And basically, every tool we use has things like keyboard shortcuts or settings that maybe the defaults for the tool are actually terrible. And if you went
Mhm.
in and played with the settings a little bit, it would work better for how your brain works or how you like to work.
Sure.
But I think I see a lot of people using default settings on apps that they don't understand how to use and just feel like that's okay. And I
Yeah.
don't think it is okay.
I agree. And there's a thing in that that just I struggle with too, which is just like I am not always one who is great at like reading the instructions for things. And I feel the same way about tools. It's like I just get so lazy and I think I should already know how to use them. And then I start using them poorly. And then my poor intuitive use of them becomes my habit. And I've gotten actually better about it since doing this work, but I didn't used to always take the time to really be like, how does this work? It's like I still I still haven't really taken the time to understand how my car works, which is insane because it is a giant computer with a car built around it. And I know it does tons of shit that I don't know how to do. And I don't know what my problem is. I just am like, I know how to drive. I can get to places. That's like the most important thing. Like I know how to play music on it and use self-driving. So I'm like, I'm good. But like, what is my problem that I won't take an hour and fucking watch like the YouTube video? Jesus.
Well, in your defense, I could make a
Thanks, Sam.
similar argument from the other direction. That's like a true professional can do their work with any tool. So at the same time, the like 30-year veteran carpenter can have very strong preferences about his preferred tools, and also I could give him a garbage hammer and he'll be fine, but just be grumbly about it. So there is something I think also to be said about not leaning too hard on kind of the original thing that I said. So partially it's like, does it actually matter whether or not you know all the ins and outs of your car? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I think it matters a whole lot more for something like an email program or any other tool that you have to use at work all day long. And your proficiency with it determines like how the work goes, basically.
I think you're right, but I think that like the underlying principle is the same, which is like if you've got features and you bought them, why not learn how to use them? Because it's like
And
I am
yeah.
doing the equivalent thing in my car the way that I park it of like using a mouse to start a new email. And it's like I know that fucker parks itself. I have no idea how it works.
Yeah. Well, and at the very least, you could learn the features or the options and then deliberately decide not to use
I
them. I feel like
could.
that is a different, maybe similar end result, but a different experience for getting there.
I could. You know what I did this weekend? I put a task in my son's mama for Saturday, and I actually spent time on my phone cleaning out my apps, managing my subscriptions, organizing things into folders, taking stuff off my home screen that I don't use. I do that like once every like 3 years. It felt so good.
Yeah. So how'd it feel?
Felt so good. It was not hard. It was actually kind of fun. It was like cleaning out a closet, and I really enjoyed it. But like that is just that kind of thing at work. I just feel like we do not make time for typically.
Totally. And I think you can do something similar where, take your top three tools or apps that you use at work. I'm guessing it's some sort of email tool, Outlook or whatever, some sort of browser, whatever browser you're using at work, and whatever the third one is. And spend a day. This is a 2-day effort. So on the first day, you're just noticing like what you are consistently doing in the tool. So like just be mindful of it for a day, maybe jot down like these are the things that you are mostly doing in the tool. On the second day, learn the keyboard shortcuts for those things. The 80-20 rule applies here. There's probably 20% of the shortcuts that you have to memorize in order to get 80% of the benefits of it. You don't have to, it's not a test in the sense of like, you have to learn every single keyboard shortcut, even for this function that you'll never use. Like, no, I don't know how to use every single keyboard shortcut in my email app, but I certainly know how to use the ones that I'm using hundreds of times a day. And it took me, a day and a half to get that muscle memory into my fingers.
Right. I love that. Sweet.
All right, what's another one?
Um, Different vibe, but
Yeah, let's
I
change the
think,
vibe.
yeah, let's switch up the vibe because you and I could just talk about tools for the
Okay.
rest of the time. Um, I think even though it's mundane, appreciation is hard to overdo.
Yeah.
And the reason that I'm calling it out is because I just did my like summative feedback process with Source. And one of the comments was like, the, keep playing the appreciation game. And I think the reason that I call it out specifically is because it's not the kind of thing that you usually get a lot of feedback on. When you say, this is really good work, or I really appreciate you doing this, or I see like how much progress you made on this, or like I see you in some way because I am paying attention to you and what and how you're contributing. Mostly, 8 times out of 10, you don't get a lot back from that except like a heart emoji or like thanks or like whatever. So it's
Yeah.
easy to, I think it's easy to let go of. It's a mundane thing that's easy to let go of. But I think it means more to people than is easy to see. And
Totally.
I think that to me at least, it creates that line of open communication so that when I have something to say that isn't so positive, it's not the only feedback someone's ever heard from me. Like they don't only hear from me when there's something that I think could be better.
It's like, oh God, Rodney's in my DMs. That means I'm
Yeah,
getting chewed out for something.
yeah,
It could be.
exactly.
There's a 5 to 1 chance that this is something great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I try to keep that like 5 to 1. There's that old HBR article that says high performing teams have a ratio of 5 to 1 positive to critical feedback. Average performing teams have 3 to 1. Underperforming teams have 1 to 1. And I do not, anyone who knows me and anyone who's listened to this show will not be surprised to hear me say, I do not give out appreciation performatively. I truly only do it legit because I legitimately feel that way. And it's easy not to notice when you feel that way. It's easy to notice when you feel that way and not do shit about it. It's easy to do it in a very like generic and not very thoughtful way. And I think you get a lot more juice for that squeeze than is easy to even see.
I think that's so right. And I really, when you were talking about how the way someone returns or like acknowledges that gratitude is often quite subdued
Yeah.
is so like I see that in myself, but also I know the internal experience of it is so much more intense, and like I can ride that shit for weeks. Like someone gives me some gratitude on something that was maybe like not super obvious or I wasn't expecting, like that high can last for a while. And
Yeah.
I probably was like, oh, cool. Yeah, thank you for that. But on the inside, I'm like, and then maybe this is just my own psychological challenges that I crave it so much. We can dig into that another time. But I think I don't think I'm alone in that.
Nobody doesn't want gratitude and appreciation and praise or to like be unseen or unsung. No one. And a lot of people, because of their own like midnight zone stuff, actually have a hard time receiving positive feedback in the
Yeah.
moment. And so I'm saying that out loud because that shouldn't stop you from doing it. Just because somebody might like, you know, not be able to articulate that it meant something to them or even be dismissive of it or even like deflect it in some way and be like, it was the team or it's no big deal or whatever. Like it does mean a lot to people still. And so I think it's worth it. I think it's worth doing. I was gonna say something else. Oh yeah. Tying this back to our last conversation also, um like I don't think of like appreciation and gratitude as some like fucking mystical spiritual process. I will put a task in my son Sama,
Yeah.
like on a plane ride home, that will be like, write a woot to this person about this thing on Monday.
Yeah.
Like it's a hygiene game like anything else. That doesn't make it any less meaningful because you notice it in a moment, you put it in your tool, you time it correctly. I will like make myself a quick note that's like, here's what I saw. Um, and it's, talk about easy things to skip. You'll never get to it if you don't have a system around it. So
Totally.
appreciation and gratitude, do it more than you think you need to. It will not hurt anybody. Unless you're
And I
being
think
insincere, in which case don't do that
true.
shit.
Yeah, don't be insincere about it. I think the last thing I'll just throw onto this topic is that it might be beneficial to think even more broadly about who could benefit from your gratitude. So I was obviously this whole time thinking about
Yourself.
colleagues, people I work with, myself for sure. But I have a practice where I just periodically kind of go through the list of clients who I've worked with in the past, and I just shoot them notes, because generally the way we are partnering with clients for 3 months or 6 months or 18 months, I was working as close or closer with these people as I was my other colleagues at the Ready. And you develop like intense friendships doing this work sometimes. And when a project ends, obviously you kind of naturally that falls to the side just because we're not working together anymore. So I have found it to be a really great practice to just reach out to these folks and be like, hey, remember 3 years ago when we worked together on this thing? I was thinking about it today. I was thinking about you. Hope you're doing well. That's it.
Yeah.
I've never felt bad for having done that.
No, of course. And like, again, even if you don't get a response or a meaningful response, like do it anyway. Just like be one of the people in this world who injects that kind of energy into the universe,
Yeah. Love it.
All right. What you got?
All right. What do I got? Do your operating rhythm. You got to do it. You can't just talk about it.
But is it just meetings, Sam?
You just got to do it. In some ways, Rodney, it is just meetings, but maybe we should remove the J word out of there.
Oh, okay.
It's not just anything.
It's just
meetings. So the thing with this one is that when we talk about operating rhythm, we obviously have many episodes where we have gone into a lot of detail about parts of it. We've talked about it as an entire concept. It's just the stack of meetings that your team has on different cadences for different purposes, generally at a minimum consisting of something like a weekly action meeting, a monthly to 6 week-ish retrospective, quarterly strategy meeting. Let's just say that's kind of the bare minimum there. You got to show up and actually do those. You got to actually put them on the calendar. And when they arrive on your calendar, even when you don't feel like doing it, and actually, maybe especially when you don't feel like doing the retro or actually doing the action meeting, you do it anyway, because that's when you get the value from it. The whole point of an operating rhythm is that it is holding space for what we know to be important conversations to happen without anybody having to consciously remember to make the space for those conversations to happen. And it's really easy to just kind of skip it or be like, oh, we don't need it this time, or we'll reschedule it. And sometimes there are good reasons to do that, but it should be extremely infrequent, and the default should be we do the op rhythm meetings.
I love that.
And being a stickler about it is like not a way to make friends, but also somebody brand. Needs to. And I love that person who, and a lot of times it's is you. Me in some places. I love myself.
I love me. I'm a stickler. Also, I'm just doing callbacks. That's my job during this episode. Mm-hmm. I use Sunsama, which is in that task management system. There are others that do this. You can choose a date for your task, which I enjoy very much because a lot of times I'll be like, make a acupuncture appointment, but I'll put it on Monday because I'm going to do it for Thursday. Whatever, you get it.
Yep.
If I know I have a topic for a meeting and I don't want to forget it, I'll put it in my Sunsama for that day right above that meeting. And then as I'm scrolling through, I'm like, oh, right, I wanted to bring this up at Marketplace, or I wanted to remember this in the retro, or I wanted to get this proposal ready or whatever. So like these things should, or I wanted to express gratitude in this meeting. These things can work together does that make them atomic habits? I should really just read that book. I'm like, is that it? Are we doing it? We work together. Yeah. You build on them? Yeah. No? I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
You said that.
I mean, it's your definition of atomic habits. Who knows what the book says at this point?
Who cares? We redefined it. I'm sure I read that book. Okay. So yeah, I love that. Do your op rhythm.
Yeah. And you don't have to much like the discipline of working out or other things that you want to do on a regular basis. The whole point is that you do them even when you don't feel like doing them.
Yeah.
Whether or not you feel like doing a thing if you're trying to be disciplined about it, like that doesn't come into the picture. It's the time to do the thing, and we have decided that we do it on this rhythm, so we're just going to show up and do it. And you can, much like the first mile of every run always sucks, but once you get into it, you kind of get into the flow. I've shown up to lots of action meetings where I'm like, I don't think we need to do this today. And then I'm like, oh, I had like 6 triage items and I helped 3 colleagues unblock things. Like, oh, that was actually a good use of time.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking of meetings, I'm just going to say it. Do your check-in rounds. Folks, do not skip the check-in round. We haven't talked in a while about why we do check-in rounds, but as a quick refresher, helps us start on time, start the way we mean to go with shared use of voice, get to know our colleagues better, get present from the last meeting. My super hot take, when I do a project with clients and after I'm gone, they stop doing check-in rounds, my assumption is everything else we've done will fall apart.
Yeah.
Because a lot of clients that I've worked with, other stuff didn't stick, but the check-in round did. But if that, like I worked with a team inside of a larger project, and that team was just like, they were butt heads from the beginning. And like the second I handed over facilitation to their nominated facilitator, they basically, objected to doing a check-in round and stopped doing it. And I was just like, I wasn't in the meetings anymore, but she immediately told me. And I was just like, yeah, this is over. Like, first it'll be the check-in round, then it'll be triage, then it'll be project updates, then it'll be the Kanban board, then it'll be retros, then it'll be governance. And pretty soon you'll be back to your shitty status meetings. And sure as shit, within a month, it was just like back to fucking PowerPoint theater with the boss man talking for 95% of the meeting. So do your check-in rounds, because though I generally don't like slippery slope arguments, I'd say this is one where I think if you can't do this for 2 minutes out of the meeting, you're unlikely to do stuff that's actually hard.
Yeah. There's so many variations that you can do on the check-in round where, on the one end, we've got teams who love the check-in round. They'd spend the whole meeting doing the check-in round if you would let them.
Sure.
And then on the other end, you have teams more like what you just described there. And there are different flavors of check-in that can be brought into that meeting based on like how the vibe of the team is. And you can still get most of the juice from that squeeze, even if our check-in round never deviates from just what has your attention. Like we do fun check-in rounds for this podcast, but like you can get a lot of value out of just the default of, hey, everyone, real quick, what has your attention? Great, we're into the meeting.
Totally. I totally agree. So don't negotiate away from them. You're not too good for them. You have not evolved past them. It is the Jenga piece that if you pull it out, your tower will be unsteady.
Cool. All right. I think Next I have one more. One more on this list is mine.
Vamos.
And then you have a couple more, but we can decide how many
I'm
more
so
we want to
hot.
do here.
Okay.
Yeah, I figured you might be getting to the end
He's
of your
melting.
So I just wrote this down as good async communication, or like basically being thoughtful about how to communicate if you're using a tool like Teams or Slack, even in email too, but I'm particularly thinking through Slack and Teams. There's this great website. I'll have to find the URL, but it basically is a one-page website that is all about the phrase, don't say hey. And what I mean by that is that when you are in an environment where you are using a chat tool, if you just send a message to a team or to a channel or to an individual that just says, hey, and then you don't say anything else, Boo. You're doing it so wrong and Boo. Everybody hates you.
Boo.
Don't say hey. Say the thing right away. Because if you are waiting for somebody to acknowledge your hey, we are no longer in asynchronous conversation. We have just taken something that could have been so beautifully async, and I had to acknowledge your hey in order for the information to come out. So maybe you don't do this. Maybe you are my friend. But if you don't do this, if you are a hey sayer, try not saying hey. It's not rude. Just say your thing. You can even say like hey and like M dash. Or, hey, exclamation point, and then say your thing. But don't just say, hey.
I agree. Also, build on that. This is sort of a side tangent, but I have really gotten into the habit in the last couple of years of, particularly in a DM situation, if I'm asking someone for time, like synchronous, like, hey, do you have a minute?
Yeah.
Always saying, like, it's not bad. If it's not bad. If it is
And
bad, that say la vie,
if
dude.
you're my brain, I'm like, she would say that just to get
Just
me.
to mess with
But
you?
no.
No, I
Yeah.
really wouldn't. Don't listen to Sam, you guys.
Yeah.
See, I wouldn't do that. Like I I I was in a meeting the other day with Colin, and I made a triage. It wasn't a DM, but I made a triage card because I wanted to talk to him about his role in like it was a very like macro conversation, and I put in parentheses, or maybe I said verbally, like, this isn't bad. This is just like a thing.
Yeah.
And he was like, thank you for telling me that. I've had more than one person with the DM thing be like, thank you for letting me know, because
Yeah.
even if I have never once asked you for time and had bad news, we all
Yeah.
have that assumption. I mean, Jack did that to me like not that many days ago, and I immediately responded, and I was like, is this bad?
It's funny when he does it to you, though. But
No,
yeah,
it's not, Sam. I am also a person.
I know, Rodney. No,
Yeah. And I was like, is this bad?
This is great because I think this is one of those things about doing async well that is so mundane. If we worked in an office and we sat next to each other and I needed to
Yeah.
we could put so much information in our body language and just
Totally.
like how we're engaging. And you don't obviously get that in asynchronous written communication. So we have to do things like say, this is not bad.
It's nothing bad.
In order to have that same sort of experience. And if
Yeah.
we don't do that, then we wonder why people don't do a good job working async, or things aren't going as well as we feel like they should be.
Yeah, exactly. So don't say, hey, don't say got a minute with no context unless you're actually firing someone.
Yeah, love it.
Sweet.
Want to do one more?
Yeah. Okay. This
Yeah.
is my humble plea because we're talking about mundane things that are super important. Reading and writing. Man, do people hate reading and writing. It astonishes me the way in which people will not read shit or write shit down. And my goodness, if there are two habits that have outsized benefit in terms of your organization's functioning, reading to learn new things, to be inspired, to hear contradictory points of view, to spot trends that are coming, to understand what your colleagues are reading. Reading, it's fundamental for a reason. Writing, I had a client who used to joke once she learned a bunch of ways of working about the power of the pen. And she was just like, oh, if I write the proposal, then I mostly get my way. And I was like, that's correct. You do. Writing, though, I think both in terms of making things explicit, I think a way to have power in a system, even if it's not explicit authority, is by being the one to clarify something in writing. And
Right.
I don't think anyone ever really learns something until they can teach it. And I know in my own process, when I am going to explain things, when I'm going to explain something to the ready that I've learned about, for example, the way I always start that is by writing something and posting it and then conversation. Because I'm basically like, I don't fully understand this until I have synthesized it, written it down clearly, and then we can be in discussion about it. So just read and write stuff and like put that time in your calendar and actually use it for that. It's so worth it.
Yeah. No, I love that. It's so useful in lots of different contexts. I'm just thinking about my actual client context right now, where last week I was feeling like we were kind of at a point where we needed to coalesce a bunch of stuff, and there were kind of separate things going on, and I was kind of feeling like we were maybe losing sight of what we really needed to do. So I spent a morning and I wrote like a 4-page thing, and I pulled it all together, and I invited people into that document, even though there was misspellings and some of it was just bullet points, to help me make sense of it together. And that process of actually writing things down helps us make sure we're all talking about the same thing. And I think so much of what goes on in a lot of organizations is that because nothing is written down, we all think we're talking about the same thing, but we
Yes.
very much are
Yes.
not.
Yes. Very much are not. I was in an internal chartering conversation today, and 15 minutes in, I was like, I think we got this. And like 30 minutes in, I was like, oh, there are very different perspectives on what this work is. We need to talk about this. And it was so valuable. And if we hadn't actually been writing down words, we all would have been spent the 15 minutes talking kind of about the thing, kind of walked out and been like, think we got it. We did not got it. Till we did. Then we did. And now it's dialed. Write stuff down.
And I think, to bring this back to meetings, because that's apparently what we do at Ready is just
Apparently.
meetings.
It's just meetings.
The Amazon memo meeting,
Yes.
where basically you spend the first bit reading a very well written document that somebody has put together, and then we talk about it. Or similar type thing, the silent meeting, where basically we're all in a document together and leaving comments for 30 minutes maybe, and then talking about it, which is actually what I'm literally going to do with a client in about half an hour.
Nice.
Sometimes people think like, we can't do that in a meeting. Like, we're going to have a meeting and not talk to each other for the first half hour. Like, yeah, that is what we're going to do, because it's really valuable to read and write stuff and then be on the same page about what it is that we're actually discussing. Like, totally valid type of meeting to do.
And as an aside, for the people who hear you say that and go, well, if we're just going to read, why can't we all do it on our own time? First of all, everybody's not gonna. Second of all, when you are reading synchronously the same thing, you read for a different level of understanding, and there's a different level of accountability and pressure created in that environment than if you skim some shit before you're supposed to show up and kind of talk about it. So like, just do it. Just do it anyway. It's a small thing, but it actually does, I think, make there's a significant difference between the pre-read and the in-meeting timed read.
Totally.
Dig it.
All right. Did we do it?
We did it. I think.
All right.
I think we did it.
So.
I'm still vertical. I'm conscious. If you could see me, I've like been slowly like rolling up like the cuffs of my pants, like untucking my shirt, just like quietly sipping water.
Your video froze for me about 40 minutes ago, so you look quite fresh still.
Oh, really? I guess it doesn't really matter, does it?
No, I think it should be fine. But
okay, great.
In my mind, I'm like, yeah, she looks like she's fine, and you're probably over there just absolutely dying.
I'm okay, actually, but I might go jump in the lake after this before my next meeting.
Nice. Closing round. What should we do for closing round today?
How about this random sticky note that you wrote?
Okay.
That's a fun...
is a mundane thing that you want to get better at?
Okay. I just made a giant eye roll before I'm about to say this. 4 days ago, started tracking my food.
Okay.
Because I am a woman of a certain age, and for like good health and good hormonal health, like I need to be eating more protein and I need to be eating more like vitamins. I need there to be more food in my food than there is when I'm left to my own devices. Mm-hmm. And so over the weekend, part of my big app clean out was doing a bunch of research about food tracking apps and what was going to have like the most AI and the lowest, lightest lift, because I am lazy and not particularly interested in nutrition. And so I am 4 days in and I am doing it, and I am learning a lot about what's in food and a lot about how what's in a lot of my food is nothing. So it's very mundane, but I'm going to try to get better at, the awareness creation is like, it's a really big part of the game with that one.
Totally. Well, and the thing about something like that is you don't necessarily have to do it for the rest of your life. Like it's the type of thing where you do it for a couple of weeks or a couple of months even, and you've recalibrated yourself to understand like what you should be doing, like what
like
sort of nutrients are in what sorts of food, that sort of
have a couple of eggs rather than like 2 romaine hearts. Who knew?
Yes.
Not me.
I thought you were going to say like candy bar or something. Okay, you're dealing with different challenges than I am. Maybe don't eat an entire pizza, Sam.
Oh, yeah. I don't eat like junk food. I just eat like nothing food. Just like I eat like popcorn. And it's like, it's not terrible for you, but it's not, there's nothing in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Nice.
So anyway, that's the mundane thing that I want to get better at is actually understanding enough about nutrition that I can put good things in my body that I need to have for it to function well.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you?
Mine is different, although I could benefit from that, as I alluded to. I think I am very good at individual knowledge management and task management because I've got my systems and I know how I like to do stuff. But when you bring a teammate or teammates into the picture, things get a little bit more complicated. And I'm not as good as I should be about having shared task management and shared knowledge management be as clean and as tight as it probably should be. So I'm going to try to get a little bit better at that so that my teams can be more effective in what we're doing.
Dig it.
All right. Well, we're always looking for new topics for the show. So if you have an organizational pattern that you're having trouble changing, shoot us a note at podcast@theready.com.
This show is engineered by Taylor Marvin and produced by Jack Van Amberg, who was so patient with me for the last 2 days as I tried to get a lake house set up functioning, and I really appreciate it. At Work with the Ready is created by The Ready, where we help organizations around the world change the way they work. Thank you for listening.